Now from the WNED WBFO studios, here's debate moderator, WBFO News Director, Brian Moyer.
Thank you, and welcome to all of you watching and listening across New York State. Over the next hour, we'll learn more about 4 candidates for governor who are seeking your vote on Election Day. Let's meet the candidates. Republican Rob Astorino is serving his 2nd term as Westchester County Executive. He's also running on the Conservative and Stop Common Core lines. Democrat Andrew Cuomo became governor in 2011. He's also running on the Independents, Working Families, and Women's Equality lines. Green Party candidate Howie Hawkins ran for governor on the same line in 2010. He's a Syracuse resident and a longtime activist. Libertarian Party candidate Michael McDermott is a former real estate broker and developer. He ran for Congress in 2012. Gentlemen, welcome. The candidates will be taking questions from our panelists, whom we'll meet in a moment. They will also answer video questions submitted from voters. Now, here are the rules for tonight's debate. Each candidate will have 1 minute to make an opening statement. Questions from our panelists will alternate, and each candidate will have 1 minute to answer. A bell will ring when the time has expired. Follow-up questions will be limited given time constraints. If a panelist has a follow-up, each candidate will have 30 seconds to answer. Video questions submitted by voters will be directed to all candidates, who will each have 30 seconds to respond. At the end of the question and answer period, each candidate will have 1 minute to make a closing statement. During the debate, candidates are not permitted to use any prepared notes, visual aids, or props. We ask the candidates to stay on topic and not interrupt one another. Time limits will be enforced. The League of Women Voters of Buffalo Niagara will serve as timekeepers. The order of speakers was determined by a random draw. Mr. Hawkins, you have 1 minute for your opening statement.
Thank you. I've been an organizer in movements for peace, justice, labor, and environment since the 1960s. I attended Dartmouth College and served in the Marine Corps. I've had working class jobs on construction sites and on loading docks. I've started successful small businesses, including a workers' co-op that built solar, wind, and energy efficiency upgrades for homes and businesses. I'm running for governor to go to work for the 99% of us, the working class and middle class people, who are overtaxed, underserved, and underpaid under a government that's been bought by the richest 1% with their big campaign contributions. I'm calling for a Green New Deal for New York. It would guarantee everybody the right to a useful job, a living wage, affordable health care, affordable housing, and a good education. And the centerpiece of the Green New Deal is to fight climate change by banning fracking and moving to 100% clean energy over the next 15 years. Real solutions can't wait. It's time for real change.
The first question comes from Bob McCarthy.
Let's get right to it with a question on economic development. The 2 major candidates have outlined far different approaches to fostering economic development in New York. Mr. Cuomo has established targeted programs like the Buffalo Billion and Startup New York, in which he claims successes, while Mr. Astorino proposes that lower taxes and a less stringent regulatory climate will result in even more success. What's your take on that? And we'll look forward to what the other candidates have to say on that too.
Trickle-down corporate welfare doesn't trickle down to working people and small businesses. What we need is a bottom-up, full employment, wage-led economic development policy that raises demand, and that gives real incentive to business to invest and hire. And I think the best way we can do that is to commit to 100% clean energy over the next 15 years. We have a peer-reviewed study from researchers at Cornell and Stanford say if we do that, we'll create 4.5 million jobs, good middle-income jobs in construction and manufacturing, and it would cut electric rates in half. And that's how we improve the business climate. Don't give tax cuts after the profits are made and cut their profits. Cut the costs of doing business. Cut electric rates in half. Take health care off the business budget by having a single-payer system for the state. And lower the property taxes by restoring the progressive taxes we had in the 1970s and the revenue sharing we had then. Local governments would get 8 times the amount they're getting now. They could lower their property taxes and still pay for their schools and services. So I think that's the way we get the economy moving in the right direction.
Our next question comes from Karen DeWitt.
My question is on hydrofracking. What will happen with fracking in the next 4 years if you're elected? And there's an ongoing health study. Would you continue it in a publicly transparent manner?
Well, my position is we should ban fracking because it's a danger to the climate. You burn gas and it heats up the planet because of the carbon and methane releases. And it does pollute the water and the land. We already know that from what we've seen in Pennsylvania and around the country. 5% of fracking wells fail as soon as they're drilled, 50% within 15 years, according to a study of 41,000 wells drilled in southwest Pennsylvania recently. Mr. Cuomo says he's waiting for the science, but when some science came back from the U.S. Geological Survey, his administration wanted to change the results. They edited or were suggesting edits and delays. So what is it? And then the study that you referred to is based on obsolete science. The draft state SGIS, as they call it, State Supplemental Generic Environmental Impact Statement, is 6 years old, and it's based on an underlying environmental impact statement that's 22 years old. You know, this is like a farce, and Governor Cuomo should take a position before the election so people know where he stands. I will ban fracking. Also on the panel tonight is Juan Gonzalez of the New York Daily News. His first question is for Mr. Cuomo.
Good evening. Mr. Cuomo, in 2013, you appointed a special panel, the Moreland Commission, to root out corruption in Albany. But you suddenly abolished your own panel less than a year ago, and press less than a year later, and press accounts say your aides pressured its members to squash certain investigations. Manhattan U.S. Attorney Preet Bharara is now probing what happened. How do you respond to those who call this the darkest stain of your first term? And can you assure us tonight that your office never sought to interfere with the Moreland Commission or any Attorney General investigations prompted by it, or even the current federal probe?
When I'm governor, I would re-impanel the Moreland Commission on Public Corruption and let it follow through on the investigations that began and complement what the U.S. Attorney Preet Bharara is doing. To deal with the underlying problem of our pay-to-play culture, where you get big campaign contributions and outside income for legislators in order to open the doors for special interests to get tax breaks and favors, I favor a system of full public campaign financing where everybody makes a reasonable number of $5 contributions and gets their petitions done, and then they get an equal grant. And they have to participate in a series of public debates. And you know who's running on 100% clean money and who's still getting the old dirty money. What's been passed in the legislature and what Mr. Cuomo's been advocating is a system of partial public campaign financing where you have a limited amount of public campaign financing that's matching funds and still unlimited private funding. That's just a reform that doesn't reform, puts a little public money on top of the old system that needs to be changed. And then the legislators should be banned from taking outside income. They should work full-time for us as legislators, as public servants.
Mr. Gonzalez, I believe you have a follow-up question for which candidate?
To Mr. Cuomo first, and the others can respond also, about the interview that Preet Bharara did today. He also said in that interview the only way an investigative body can get to the root of a problem is if it's independent. Mr. Cuomo, was the panel that you set up independent, and do you believe it has to be a panel has to be independent to get to the root of the problem?
Each candidate has 30 seconds. Mr. Hawkins, you have 30 seconds.
Well, I would just observe that Mr. Cuomo has said at times this Moreland panel was independent, and at other times it was a panel he created and he could shut it down. There's been an inconsistency there. And you have to wonder why he shut it down when he had said originally it was independent. And, you know, I hope the U.S. Attorney is following through in his investigation.
We now have a video question submitted by a New York voter.
My name is Andrew Rogers. I'm from East Amherst, New York. My question is, what is your position on Common Core, and do you believe it is effective in educating the young people of New York?
You will each have 30 seconds to respond, and we will start with Mr. Hawkins.
Common Core is a package that includes high-stakes testing and curriculum modules that come from the State Education Department. And I hear from a lot of teachers and students and parents that they feel this curriculum and this whole package is a test and punish regime, not a support and improve regime. That it narrows the curriculum, that it dumbs down to filling out bubbles and ignores a whole lot of other things that are about education, inquiry, questioning, collaboration, cooperative projects. I want local parents, teachers, and school boards to make the decisions about curriculum and assessment. They know what their kids need. They're the ones that care most about those kids.
If you are governor, can you assure thruway motorists that there will be no toll hike during your term, especially in light of the huge costs associated with building a new Tappan Zee Bridge?
I can assure you that the tolls won't be raised. We have an infrastructure deficit. It's not just our roads and bridges, but It's also our public transportation. I would have a policy of public transportation first before we get into private roads. We've got an interstate that's got to come down in my home city of Syracuse, and the discussion from the DOT is about how we get the commuters in and out to the hospital and university and downtown, the middle class jobs from the suburbs. Nothing about the people in the city, in the neighborhoods where half the people don't have cars, they can't get to the suburbs where their jobs. We need to talk about public transportation and target investment there. One way to more economically finance the infrastructure, instead of going to Wall Street and paying these huge finance charges, we could have a state bank like North Dakota does. And then we get the interest and principal back in the public treasury. And we put the state money there, and we operate as a bank, as the state of New York, and we could lower the cost of financing these long-term investments in infrastructure.
Karen DeWitt now has a question for Mr. Cuomo.
Mr. Cuomo, you've said in a public radio interview that people with extreme views, such as anti-abortion and anti-gun control, don't belong in New York. Can you oppose abortion or gun control and still be welcome here?
I think New York's a place for everybody, and everybody should be represented in the political system. We should switch to a system of proportional representation like most democracies in the world. So if your party gets 10% of the vote or 20% of the vote, you get 10% or 20% of the seats in the legislature. And then you get everybody together and everybody's represented. Because right now we have these one-party districts because of gerrymandering when they're redistricted, and there's no competition. I have 6 Senate seats around Syracuse, the central New York area, where there's no opposition. So I think that's one way to include everybody in the process so people aren't feeling alienated. And as far as the women's equality agenda goes, I'm upset that 9 of the items were held hostage to the 10th. We could have had 2 years ago the 9 items referring to pay equity and anti-discrimination, and then focus this election on the 10th item, which is reproductive rights, and really put the pressure on those senators that are not for reproductive rights. And then we need to expand the women's equality agenda to deal with the economic issues affecting working class women, like the minimum wage. Majority of workers, or minimum wage workers, are women.
Mr. Hawkins, public school closings and the spread of charter schools have sparked considerable controversy in many urban school districts. Charter school activists advocates have countered with multi-million-dollar ad campaigns and protests for better funding. They want Albany to lift the current statewide cap of 460 charter schools. What's your position, and what do you say to those who regard charters as a vital alternative to failing public schools?
1 minute.
Public schools fail because we're the most segregated state in the United States. And we have concentrated poverty, and all those problems come into the schools, and they're not getting the resources they need. And then they're defined as failed by this high-stakes testing, and then they're turned over to charters, where, like on the Success Academy board in New York City, there are a bunch of hedge fund investors who take advantage of federal tax credits and make money, even though these charters are nominally nonprofit. This is a cannibalization of our public school system. I'm for a full and equitable funding of public schools. We need to get rid of the gap elimination adjustment, which has balanced the state budget on the backs of our school children. We need to go back to the foundation aid formula, which is based on a court order to provide every student, like our state constitution says, with a sound basic education. So we need to fully fund our schools. And then charters, I'm not for expanding them. I'm for letting those we got be reviewed. And if they're good, good. But if they're not, they should be shut down.
We now have another video question submitted by a voter.
I am Gary Walters from Hamburg, New York. If you are elected the governor of New York, what type of financial assistance will you provide the Buffalo Bills for a new dome stadium?
Mr. Hawkins, you have 30 seconds.
Well, I think the new owner, Terry Pagula, has enough money if he wants a new stadium. He's a smart businessman. He got out of the fracking industry at its peak. If he does need it, however, I think if the state goes in, we ought to have an ownership share. In other words, like any other owner, we ought to get our share of the profits and be able to look at the books. In fact, that might be a better way to make sure the Bills stay here permanently, like the Green Bay Packers have a ownership structure that anchors that team to Little Green Bay. And I'd like to see that up here in upstate New York so our team will never leave.
Thank you. This is Election 14, the race for governor, coming to you live from the WNED WBFO studios. Let's begin a new round of questioning. Bob McCarthy has a question for Mr. Cuomo.
Yes, Mr. Cuomo, if elected to a second term, will you pledge to serve a full 4-year term?
Mr. Hawkins.
If elected, I'll serve a full term, you know, providing I'm alive and kicking.
Karen DeWitt has a question for Mr. Hawkins.
New York is in the process of setting up a limited medical marijuana program. How long do you think it will be before marijuana is completely legal in New York, and should it be?
60 seconds.
Well, if I'm elected governor, I will push very hard for the legalization, regulation, and taxation of marijuana like Washington State and Colorado are now doing. We have an enormous problem of tens of thousands of people going to prison for nonviolent offenses for holding and using marijuana. And it's irrational. It's destroyed communities, families, and individuals' opportunities in life. It's been particularly targeted at Black and Latino communities so that while blacks, whites, and Latinos use drugs at the same levels, 94% of our prisoners in the state penitentiaries are Black or Latino for drug offenses. I would provide clemency for nonviolent drug offenders after marijuana was legalized or even before, as well as those who've gone through the system so they wouldn't be branded when they go for housing, jobs, and education. This has been, I also call for a Truth, Justice, and Reconciliation Commission to examine the damages and then make recommendations for how we can put these communities and families back together.
Candidates will now deliver closing statements. Mr. Hawkins, you have 1 minute for your closing statement.
Well, I wish this was the first of several debates. I think they had 7 for the governor's race in the state of Connecticut because we barely touched on the issues. I'm polling at 9%. That's a record for an independent progressive third-party candidate in New York history on a statewide election. But we can go much higher. I'm the only candidate on the ballot for governor who wants full employment. We got a plan for it. Who wants a minimum wage that's a living wage of $15 an hour. That's for single-payer health care. Got a plan for full and equitable funding of our public schools, for full public campaign financing, for a progressive tax reform policy that would give tax cuts to 95% of us while raising 20% more revenues we could share with the localities and then really cut our property taxes. Who wants to ban fracking and build out a 100% clean energy system over the next 15 years that would create 4.5 million jobs and cut our electric rates in half? These Green New Deal policies, I think, are policies that the majority of working class and middle class people support. If we get out to vote and vote for what we want, we can win this election. Vote green.
Well, this will bring our debate to a close. Thank you to our panelists and to the League of Women Voters of Buffalo Niagara for helping tonight's program. We also thank the candidates, Rob Astorino, Andrew Cuomo, Howie Hawkins, and Michael McDermott. Please hold your applause for just a moment. We also thank you for watching and listening. Now it's time to make your voice heard. Please remember to vote on Election Day, Tuesday, November 4th. I'm Brian Meyer. Good evening.